I'm going to teach you something they don't teach you in school, something that has made me millions on the internet. And now it sounds weird to say because most people don't like to talk about politics or money, but I talk about both politics and money here on YouTube. My name is James Lyles. I am the founder and CEO of my own holding company that I started back in 2002, and I am a multimillionaire. And one of the things they don't teach you in school when it comes to wealth and entrepreneurship and becoming financially independent is how to spot trends. So I just want to give you some thoughts on that and share some experiences that have worked for me. So one of the greatest ways, especially in the age of the internet, is to see what's coming down the pike and then position yourself either as it's ramping up or before it hits to make lots of money. So I started making money on the internet back in the year 2000, 25 years ago. It was about the summer of 2000. And what was happening back then was the dot-com boom. And all these big companies that are not really relevant anymore, like pets.com and all these other companies were out there, and they were getting millions and billions of dollars from investors. And it seemed like if you had any kind of dumbass idea, if it had .com behind it, you could make money. This is probably going to be a weird edit because I just thought about something I want to share with you, and I'm putting it in this part of the video. A story. There was a guy that I worked with at Arthur Andersen, and he had this idea for a .com where they would do press releases and then email them to the press. So it was like, if you want to do a press release for your company, you would send it to his company, and then it was essentially just a mass email service. He went out, and in 2 weeks, I remember because he was a coworker of mine. In 2 weeks, he got about $3.5 million for this company. And then he put in his 2-week notice because it was about a month from when he let me know, hey, I'm going to go for this. And then a month later, he was gone after putting a 2-week notice. So let me just tell you, I wasn't super impressed by this guy. That's why I started thinking back then, there's money to be made if you pay attention to what's going on. Anyway, let me go back to the video you were just watching. So I saw that this was a trend that I thought I was actually going to miss. I thought I was at the tail end of it, but I was seeing that people were finally coming around to the trends of the .com. I mean, I had been involved in the internet. I had my first email address in 1992, and I had no one to email. And going back to 2000, I saw that everyone was crazy about the .com, and I said, well, what about the small and smaller businesses and mid-sized businesses? Who's serving them to get them online? And that's where I started making money. Part-time. I was working for Arthur Andersen as an economist, and part-time, in the first 5 months of my business, I generated $60,000 part-time in the year 2000. So I learned to see trends, especially on the internet, and then figure out what I can do to take advantage of that trend. I figured that every business had to be online, and it was about the .com. Now, that strategy doesn't work today. Now it's about having a social media presence. So what are some ideas on how you can actually position yourself in front of a trend? Well, I'm going to cover that in a subsequent video. But what I'm going to cover here is how to actually know how to find what's right around the corner. First of all, what you want to do is use the internet. You want to use something, I don't know, you might have heard of it. It's called Google. You're watching this on YouTube, and YouTube is a Google product. And like I said, the second largest search engine in the world, the first being Google. So Google owns the first and second. And what you want to do is you just want to go on Google and start looking at Google Trends. Use the word trend, internet, technology. Or if you have an expertise in a certain field or niche, start seeing what's trending, what people are talking about, what's coming up in that particular niche or area of expertise that you have. The bottom line is that if you can find things that are starting to ramp up fast in Google, in trendings, in search, then you can position yourself to do well. Once again, I could say you can make a fortune, but that depends on lots of things like how quickly you act and your business acumen. And if you want to stay plugged into how you can develop all those things, just make sure you subscribe to this channel. Also, use Reddit and Twitter. When it comes to Reddit, start going into some of these subgenres of Reddit and see what people are talking about. Once again, let me back up. Let me give you an example. This was around 2000, 2001, I was working for Arthur Andersen. I worked in their IP department, not intellectual property. It was IPM, intellectual property management. And what I did is I worked in the Los Angeles practice, but I worked for the San Francisco practice. And we had a group where they would take the huge accounting clients of the firm and look at their intellectual property, their patents, and other intellectual property that they had rights to, and figure out how they can utilize that to make more money for their company. Now, I mentioned that this group I worked for, though I was in Southern California, was in Northern California because many of our clients up there were Silicon Valley companies. Now, hear me out, because I'm not saying you have to be in investment banking or in some firm like I worked for to know what the trend was. See, here's what happened. One of our clients had what they had called, what at the time they called patents for small form factor interactive screen technology, or in other words, touch screens. So what we use today, on our iPhones and our Androids and tablets. And of course, now with laptops with touch screens and computers with touch screens. Now they had that, but back then it was PDAs, it was Palm Pilots and things of that sort. That's where the technology was being geared towards. But because I was on these internet groups as part of my job researching, I was talking to engineers and other people about what they would do with this technology, and they were all excited about having that on cell phones. And all the things that could be done with cell phones, and that PDAs were going to be totally in the past, that PDAs would be integrated with the cell phones. Now, cell phones I got my first cell phone in 1996, and they were big and they were large just because I worked for a paint contractor and I needed that when I was out in the field. It was the Nextel. Remember those? Another trend that came and went, the push to talk. I mean, it still exists, but it's not as popular as it was. The engineers, because I was in these sub-genre groups, were giving me ideas about this technology, which I fed to our clients up in Silicon Valley. Of course, our clients knew that that was a future application, but some very specific ideas of how to implement that technology-wise was happening in those specialized groups, which would today be like subreddits and groups on Twitter. I saw this technology firsthand in these patents 25 years ago. But you didn't have to be in my position to see that was a trend. If you were in those subgenre groups on AOL and other places, then you would have been ahead of the curve. That's the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so let's continue discussing on how you can find what the future trends are going to be. I'm going to speed it up now. Look what's happening in other countries. You can look at what's happening in Japan or Europe, and sometimes that gives you an idea of trends that are very popular that haven't yet hit, for instance, if you're in the United States, and vice versa. Sometimes things start off in the United States, but they haven't quite come to other Western countries or Asia, and that's an opportunity. You want to see what's happening in other industries and how those trends can be applied to your particular field or expertise. You can look at what's happening tech, fashion, entertainment, even gaming. There's a whole culture around every one of those that spell opportunity. And those cultures are evolving, and trends start small and then they ramp up and go viral, become very popular. Once again, if you know how to dig and start watching for these things, then you can position yourself to take advantage of what hasn't happened yet, but will happen soon or relatively soon. Look at new behaviors that are being coupled with new technology. For instance, Match.com was around a long time, so a long time now, relative to other dating online services. But of course, if you were to stay thinking that online dating services were always going to be on a desktop, then you'd have gotten it wrong, because what do most people now do when they interact with technology? It's using apps on their phones. So someone said, oh, okay, this is a new trend, people finding dates and finding their soulmate online, but people are now gravitating toward apps and social media more than traditional desktop. And that's where you got your Tinders and your Bumble and Mutual and all these other apps that are being used now for matchmaking, for finding dates and for hooking up and for finding your soulmate, whatever the case may be. The people who got rich on that looked at new behaviors and matched them to new technology. And speaking of social media, just be on social media. I mean, not wasting social media looking at stupid things, but and nothing wrong with that, because we all like to have a little bit of time suck. I try to limit mine to 11 to 12 minutes a day. But targeted searches to see what's going viral. A lot of things start popping up on social media, once again, in these little sub-genres before the masses see them. And let me give you one last pro tip. It's this. Pay attention to what the VCs are doing, the venture capitalists. Where are they putting their money? What are they investing in? What companies are they buying? Because they're spending billions of dollars because they are betting on what's going to happen in the future. How can you take advantage of that knowledge of knowing what they're after and what they're looking at to position yourself to take advantage of those things? Which, once again, I'm going to cover that in a subsequent video. So I say all of that to say this, and once again, I've got a few bullet point notes here that I created. But this is more stream of consciousness. That's why I've had to come back and edit stuff in. But the idea is you have to be proactive. That's what I want. That's what I want. If there's any takeaway, be proactive. Be out there looking for what's coming on, what's going to be out there on the horizon. What's on the horizon that isn't out yet. It's not going to fall in your lap. Things don't happen by accident. You have to be proactive in looking for it. You have to create your luck, your fortune, your windfall by being proactively looking for what is about to come. It's a mindset. And once you have that mindset and you act on that mindset, that's where all of a sudden the opportunities will start to present themselves. So anyway, hopefully you got some ideas there. This is mostly a stream of consciousness. Let me know if you have any questions and any other topics you'd like me to cover. And I will talk about how to position yourself in a subsequent video. Maybe not the next one, but an upcoming video. I'll talk about how to actually put yourself in the stream of what's coming. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.